It's your show.
Well, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. So I'll be presenting tonight on Doyle Street MEWS over on Doyle Street. So here's the location we're talking about. 59th Street is to the north, Powell Street's to the south. So project overview, this is to demolish 4 existing legal units and 2 legal units. Because it includes the demolition of residential units, this requires city council approval. And the proposal is to replace it with 6 new units, all of which have 3 bedrooms. So for background, this originally came to Planning Commission for a study session back in April of 2016. At that time, there were questions about the feasibility of obtaining 50 bonus points, which are needed for this project through the use of zero net energy on the site. There were also concerns raised about existing trees to the north and east sides of the property, and in general, unit and project design feedback was provided. It came back again to the Planning Commission in August of 2016, and at this point, the applicant revised their proposal in response to concerns about net zero not being feasible. So the proposal at that time was for 50 bonus points for family-friendly unit design, as well as 50 bonus points supporting citywide small business funds. The Planning Commission supported those concepts, or that proposal rather, and there were concerns still about potential impacts to the redwood tree, which is on the north side across the property line, and also additional unit and project design feedback. This also went to City Council for a study session in November 2016. They were generally supportive of the project. The issues they raised as concerns were design and materials at that time, preservation of the redwood tree again, and the council deferred back to Planning Commission for advice and direction on those issues. So here we are again today. There is a new architect on the project, Barron Studios. They also have a presentation for you this evening. Materials, building design, and articulation have all changed. I do have a new materials board. I'm not passing it around because it's kind of heavy, but let me know if you would like to interact with it, and we'll make sure that happens in a safe manner. All right, so in addition, unit design has been changed significantly. Previously, stairs along the front unit were located between the windows and the living spaces. That's been flipped. There's also more family-friendly design details, and a pier-on-grade foundation for Unit 3, which is a northern building, easternmost unit, has been designed in response to the concerns about the redwood tree. Also, landscaping and open spaces have been revised, and additional information has been provided on those spaces. So here's some existing photos of the site. And here's proposed development. So here's a site plan zoomed in a little bit. I lost my cursor. There we go. And something that came up before was the design of trash enclosures, and those are located at the very front of the property. The applicant has been working with Marcy Greenhunt and Public Works to make sure that they're adequately sized and located so that they can be picked up properly from waste management. And here's the plan that they submitted. Marcy's reviewed this plan and feels that it meets all regulations and requirements for that. So what we have here, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen. This is the anticipated location that the garbage truck would pull up. And this is the path of travel to get to the 3 types of waste streams on either side, which are enclosures in front of the buildings. So site plan for landscaping is here. Yeah, there's a lot more details than before. We do have water efficient landscaping ordinance here, so this plan appears to comply with that. Some more details will be provided in the future to make sure that all the measurements for that pencil out. And here is the tree on the north side of the property. So this thicker line here is the property line, and then there's kind of this jagged line representing the redwood tree. And then what this is showing, the dark green is redwood tree primary root plate. So if you cut into the roots in that area, it can compromise the structural stability of the tree itself. And then the larger, lighter green circle is representing where there could actually be tree roots to that full extent of that area. Most of that area is paved over right now, so it's not known for sure exactly where they are, but this is, there was an arborist report attached, included in your report here that discussed this, and the arborist came to the last study session for Planning Commission as well to discuss the details of this. So as you can see, the northeastern unit here, the outline of it overlaps with that redwood tree zone. So that now has a pier on grade foundation, so that's raised up, it's not level with the ground, and there's some more flexibility in where you can actually put the supports that way to avoid the tree roots. So here's rendering from the west facade from Doyle Street. And we're just going to go around the building right now. This is the back side. This would be facing the neighbors to the rear. This is the north facade, so there'd be the redwood tree over to the left here on the side of the property, of the neighbor's property, rather. The south facade here. And then here, there's a driveway in the middle, if you haven't noticed that already. And this would be the north building. If you're like in the south building looking across, this is what you would see. And then if flip from that, if you're facing south, if you were in the north building looking across the driveway. And here we are facing north again. So where my cursor is where the trash enclosures are, and entryways here to the unit, the front unit. If you were to walk into the property now, going into that center driveway, you're looking back at the rear of the property here, and this is the northern building, and the southern building is on the right side of this image. This would be unit 1, so this is the frontmost unit. You're in the driveway right now, but looking at the unit 1. And this would be looking out in the background here would be Doyle Street, and this is unit 3, I believe. Is that correct? Is that unit 3? 4. My apologies. I got that backwards, so that's mislabeled. I apologize. And here's the common space that's proposed in the rear. So where this green is, that would actually be looking across Doyle Street there. There's the common driveway, and in the back there's common open space. And this would be the north building here. So the unit design of the first floor has been revised, as I mentioned earlier. There's parking for the first 2 units, and then back here, unit 3, this is the pier on grade, so there's actually a few steps up into that building. The stairwell has been relocated. Instead of being directly at the front of these units along Doyle Street, you now enter towards the back of the unit. When you go upstairs to the second unit, there's open space for each unit on this floor is in the form of a deck, and the stairwells are not between the windows in the front and the living spaces. And on the third floor of all the units is where you have bedrooms, and the rear unit steps back in response to both Planning Commission and neighbor concerns about having too much bulk at the rear of the property, having it step down towards the rear of the property. So for zoning, this is in the mixed-use residential zone. So because it's a site of less than 1 acre, a mix of uses is not required. It's also in the North Hollis overlay, so this doesn't modify any permitted uses in any way. For zoning, they're going over the base for, proposed to go over the base for floor area ratio as well as residential density. So this requires the full 100 bonus points. There's no bonus for height. They're at 30 feet, which is the maximum in this area. For parking, their permitted parking range is 5 to 8 spaces. They're proposing 6, 1 for each unit. And for bicycle parking, they're required to have a minimum of 7 spaces. They're showing areas for designated within each unit. For bike parking, we just need some more details on that to verify the feasibility of it, but it's looking good. And they also have the shared guest parking at the back of the property, so there will be exceeding the bicycle parking requirement. For setbacks in the MUR zone, there's no side or front setbacks required, and there's a 10-foot rear setback required because it abuts the RM zone. They exceed that by about an additional 10 feet. And the North Hollis overlay, you're required to have 15 feet of landscaping and sidewalk from the face of the curb to the building face, and I believe it's about 19 feet, so that's exceeded as well. For open space, this application is well over that. 40 square feet of private open space per unit. There's multiple decks and private open spaces on the ground floor as well for each unit. And the common open space is well over a cumulative 120 square feet. For landscaping, there's a minimum requirement of 10% of site area, which would be approximately 1,000 square feet. The applicant proposes over 2,000 square feet of landscaping. For street trees and utility wires, there's currently no street trees, so staff is recommending that there's a requirement for street trees at every 25 feet interval, that there's 3.5 foot of planting strip to accommodate root growth, and also to underground all the utilities at this site. So this would help provide some continuity across the street. There's very well-established street trees, so it would help match that. For the community benefit options, I mentioned this earlier, the applicant is now moving forward with additional family-friendly units, which would be 100% in this case, and contributing to the small business fund. So this slide describes the family-friendly unit situation. So there's a requirement for 50% of units to be family-friendly and have 2 or more bedrooms. But that doesn't apply to developments with fewer than 10 units. So their maximum of 50 bonus points, 5 points for each additional 5% of the units. For having 50% of the units being family-friendly, they would get that. And then the applicant proposes all units be family-friendly, earning the maximum 50 bonus points, and also to have all units be 3 bedrooms. So required findings for this project, there's findings for development bonuses in the MEWS zone. For demolition of residential units, there's required findings to replace all of those units. And there's also required findings for design review. This went to DCC, their Development Coordinating Committee meeting in July, and staff comments at that time were, as we mentioned, new curb, gutter, sidewalk, street trees, underground utilities. Following up with the arborist just to make sure, it mentions in the arborist report that branches would need to be trimmed to accommodate the 30-foot height of the proposed building, but it doesn't say if that would impact the tree or not, so just to clarify that with the arborist. The redesign of the units to be more family-friendly and relocating the stairwells is very much appreciated. But the trade-off for that was reducing the visual interest on the ground floor. So staff was hoping that they could provide some revisions to that. Staff also suggested possibly considering adding EV charging stations, and that more details are needed for things such as where the mailboxes will be, addressing these sorts of things, that day-to-day practicalities that need to be addressed. So issues for you to consider tonight are the design. Does the commission have any feedback regarding the design of the overall project, landscaping, or unit design? There are significant changes from the previous proposal. Findings, does the commission feel that they would be able to make the required findings for design review, a conditional use permit, and bonus points to approve this project? And in general, does the commission feel the applicant has adequately addressed the concerns expressed and responded to the feedback provided at previous planning commission and city council study sessions? The next steps for this project, because it does involve the demolition of residential units, would be to go to a city council study session, a planning commission, come back to planning commission for recommendation, and then go back to city council for approval. So the applicants also have a presentation for you this evening.
Any questions for staff?
Are there any inhabitants in the illegal units that need to be demolished?
I don't believe so at this time. I don't know if the architect knows.
There's someone renting one of them?
Did you want to?
Nobody living in.
So, the understanding from the crowd is that there's no one currently living there.
Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, we were talking about undergrounding the utilities in front of the project. Is that a requirement, or is that something that we're requesting of the project?
That would be required as part of this project because the front of the building would have to be significantly, not the front of the building, but the front of the property and the public right-of-way would require so many significant changes to do this as part of that process.
That triggers
it's required
that.
for many projects for their facade.
Very good, thanks.
Of our Unit 1 and Unit 4 are accessible units. Are those required to be accessible, or is that something that the
Yes.
applicant is doing out of the goodness
That's
of their
a
heart?
building requirement, and they could probably speak better to that than I could. They've met with building about this project to make sure that it's meeting many requirements, not just accessibility.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions of NAR? Okay, the applicant care to come up and present?
Left it on this slide. There's also one more slide after that,
Yeah, I can start there.
wherever you like.
I mean, mostly I should come.
Yeah, I would just use this.
Those will get me back and forth. Make sure I have this under control.
Good luck.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Matt Barron with Barron Studio. Thank you for being here to help us get this all sorted out. It is our third study session, so hopefully we can get through it and get to some of the final review that we're hoping to achieve. I'm here with Maya Salehi from my office, and we're representing the owners who are not present this evening, so hopefully we can answer any questions you might have. I'm not sure. There we go. I guess that's the last slide. I can start here. I really wanted to talk in a broader sense. I mean, we did inherit this project, and you have seen it in different iterations. For the most part, it is a new design. But some of the major kind of planning and layout moves remain. It's still two buildings. There's still a road down the street, or a street down the middle. And I think that, there are only so many ways you can kind of configure a site such as this. So we maintained a lot of that overall effort, but we looked at a lot of the details. We sat through a lot of study session comments and listened to everything that was said. We met with commissioners, we met with neighbors to hear what their concerns were, and tried to get all this addressed within a reasonable framework that allowed the project to still work as 6 units and be what we're hoping for it to be, which is a family-friendly design. This slide, in fact, is showing some of the adjustments we've made since we've submitted the drawings that you've all seen. Primarily, this was to articulate the street front a little bit further. And some of the other changes that we made were, there were some concerns about the articulation of the skin, so we've kind of accommodated drainage and things of that nature by turning some of these spaces more into trellises and extensions out over the decks rather than these masses that didn't necessarily have any function. I think that Navar did a great job of talking about the project, so I don't know how much detail I need to go into. I think I'll try to be brief, and then if there are questions that you have, I'll let you ask them. But in general, we had some concerns come up about the sustainability or the kind of general plan and green nature of the project, and I think that as many projects in Emeryville, it is green in by its nature. I mean, Emeryville is a very walkable city. This is a very walkable site, bikeable site. We did a lot of things that are smaller details, like the bicycle parking and the pervious pavers and drought-resistant landscaping and things of that nature. But just by its very siting and site location and density, it has a certain amount of sustainable features built into it. As far as the design goes, I don't really want to compare it to the previous design, but it's a sort of unique situation in that we're working from what was there in the previous design and trying to address comments that were made on that project, but you in many ways have a new project. So what we're trying to do was get away from the kind of mass and bulk that was present in the previous iteration, and it was this kind of, for lack of a better term, architectural laziness of just saying, let's mirror this because we have the street down the middle. And I think what we were trying to do was maybe break this up into a little bit more of a neighborhood scale, and through the use of form and formal moves and material moves, bring this down to a scale that was maybe more in keeping with what's around it, but also not have it look like one singular massive development, but maybe a development that was related to itself in the context. And so certain aspects were mirrored because it made sense to have mirroring when there was a street down the middle and the entries fell to the outside and the cars came down through the middle. But other aspects we tried to copy, like the decks, so that they would be oriented to the sun. We also tried to step down a little bit to the neighboring properties, which was a challenge because to get the 3 floors in 30 feet isn't much. So we were hitting that pretty consistently. But there are some parapets that we brought in to sort of give that impression. The other thing is that we did adjust some of the plans as was discussed, and oops, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. So we did adjust the unit arrangements so that they were, for one, the entire project got smaller. We discovered some miscalculations in FAR, so the project did shrink a bit from the last time you've seen it. We moved circulation around. We tried to get more light and air into the units. And as part of the shrinking of the overall size of the project, the deck spaces increased. So there's more, there are larger decks off the living spaces. There's more deck to the rear of the project. And I think that some of the other things that we did that are probably should be pointed out was we did speak with the neighbors, albeit very recently, and so we did agree to sort of shorten some of the parapets. We discussed the brick building that's adjacent, so we promised that we would not build a fence against that brick wall, and we would shore it up as need be to make sure that there was no damage done to it. We also discussed the type of fence and that there would be a new fence to the rear property. As was discussed, the building steps down now to the rear of the property to address the smaller scale at the homes that are at the back there. And I think that's about it, so I'll open it up if you have questions.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant? No? Okay.
Nobody? I do.
Okay.
Okay. So, Matt, got a couple of questions for you. Unit 1 and Unit 4, they're adaptable units, right?
Yes.
And so, does that mean that all the door swing clearances have to be conforming to wheelchair criteria?
Yes.
So, do you see some variances with what those clearances might be required in those units on the ground floor?
I would have to run through and make sure that they were all, I mean,
it's a minor point, but it would affect your floor plans.
Fair enough, I understand. And that can be something we look at. I mean, I think there's still a few details that we'd like to tune up, including the amount of space for bike parking, and we can look at that as well.
Right out in front of Unit 4, Unit 1, you've got this private open space, which is, I think it's, is it pavers or concrete, or what is that?
I think at the moment we're calling it pavers. Is that?
Pavers,
Yeah.
okay. So you're putting it there on the west side, probably get some pretty nice light.
That's the hope.
And yeah, and then you have a fence, which is, how high is that, like 4 feet?
Less, actually. 3.
3 feet, okay, great. The elevations, I got some questions for you on that. Sheet A 3.0. So if you look at the top elevation on the west, that's facing the street, you've got a slope on the southern building for the one unit up there, and then you've got a parapet on the northern building that I'm assuming is also sloped. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can see it better in that rendering, I think. But
So, and are you having those as parapet walls in order to maintain some kind of minimum or maximum roof height as opposed to having sloped roofs, or that was just?
I would, the original drawings were sloped roofs, and that was the hope. But because of the, what the thought was originally was to do a master bedroom that was taller, and then step down to a lower ceiling on those other bedrooms. But given the constraints, particularly, we didn't talk much about it, but the rear units have a different, the one corner rear unit, 3, I believe, has a different floor to ceiling height because we're cutting out 18 inches because of the roots of the trees. So there's some challenges to get, what we would consider standard floor to ceiling heights in there. So we're at 30 feet, and there was no way to really go up at all from there. But it seemed like there was an opportunity to do so because you're at the center of the site and it's not impacting those neighbors. But it sort of functions now as something that we were thinking it might be a screen for any PV that came in at a later date.
Right. So, those 2 master bedroom sort of masses right there have adjacent to them horizontal panels that are in the same plane that kind of look like they're balconies, but they're not really, are they?
They're not. They're just really, I was trying to add depth to that elevation, and so there were some questions that had come up about drainage and things of that nature. So we're kind of treating it like a second skin, where a rain screen, where you would actually have water would pass behind it, and you wouldn't have to worry about sealing it in and draining it, things of that nature. But it also becomes kind of a overhang to the deck and provides some shade.
On sheet A3.1, you show the interior street or interior driveway elevations, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. So let's see, on drawing number 1 north on the left-hand side, you've got the unit, I don't know which unit that is, but the parapet pops up about 3 feet.
That's the one we've agreed to lower, if I'm not mistaken.
That's not the interior.
Right, that's the exterior wall facing the neighbors on that drawing 1.
Right, and then drawing 2 has a similar pop-up in the unit across.
Right.
And I think that carries into your...
I mean, again, this was more an effort to sort of articulate these elevations so they weren't kind of one thing, but...
That's what I figured, that's what I want to understand.
Yeah.
And then the material that you have, that looks like wood, on the base of the building that kind of wraps around it.
Yeah,
What is it? Is it photographic wood? Is it real wood? Does it have texture?
It's intended to be real wood at the moment. That's just white cedar there.
So it would be your drawings show a nice kind of horizontal, almost like ribbing, but that wouldn't really be the case. That would be more like horizontal. Just wood, strands of wood.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's maybe reading some way in the rendering that isn't quite true, but I think that the idea was that it would be, what we've been using in the past is essentially the similar profile to what you see in this. So when these interlock, they give you a very kind of clean, square reveal as opposed to a lap.
Oh, I see. And so the planning staff has made comments about how this ground floor is a little bereft of activity. Do you have any ideas about?
Well, I mean,
want to address that, or do you think
the only thing that
address it?
The only thing that we were looking at was this last image, where a lot of this is taken up by, and these are a little. They're not the beautiful renderings that Maya did on the other earlier work, but we were kind of trying to put something together for the meeting. But, we added a window that is essentially going into the garage. A big portion of this is the trash and recycling.
Right.
And the rest is, will be landscaped, and the hope would be people will actually use those porches,
So that horizontal window is an addition?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just I actually thank you for answering the question about what the most recent ground floor was, because I was thinking it was that, and I'm seeing like a lot of things, so great, because that was one of my questions. The other thing is you mentioned light and air a bit. I didn't really see it articulated in the drawings. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you're thinking?
You know, one of the comments that we had heard in the previous study sessions was that there was a appreciation for the larger windows. I think that we, as much as possible, tried to bring in large windows and get as much, you know, light and operation as we could to bring in air. But what you see here is essentially the result of, you know, maybe three things. One, the sort of function of the window. So, you know, some places you have a kitchen, or, you know, maybe there's a privacy issue, or a bathroom and a shower. So if it isn't a full height window, it's typically because of a functional requirement. And then there was some discussion about family friendly requirements as well that these were responding to. So it's more programmatic and requirements that are we were trying to follow. I don't know if that answers.
I think so. I mean, I just really wanted you to elaborate on it because it was mentioned, and
The other thing that I kind of think about when I said that is that this floor plan, and I know and I'm not here to talk about what the project isn't, I'm here to talk about what it is, but when we originally inherited this, the stairs were at the front, and it is germane because we're a continuation of that. The stairs were at the front of the property, and you kind of had this condition where the windows were being obstructed by the stair and you couldn't get up to the window. So we flipped the unit, at least in terms of the stair, so that now the windows are on the front and the balconies are on the front, and the stair is pushed to the back of that forward unit. So we're hoping it'll bring a little more openness.
Any other questions for the applicant? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. I've lived there for 37 years, so pretty familiar with the place. You know, with respect to that tree, I don't think well, first of all, that tree is not on this property. I don't even know how you can regulate it, because if that guy next door decided he wanted to cut it down, there's nothing to stop him from doing that. But that tree is going to grow to twice its size. It's 3 times the size as it was when I first moved there. And you have tons and tons of leaves pouring down from that thing every day. I would say that whole area is going to be in the shade, because that thing's going to go twice the size. I don't know who's going to go out there and trim it. And it's a big problem. That's a real fire hazard. Those pine needles are dry, really dry. And so, I mean, I often thought about getting the guy next door to help pay for moving these leaves, because you got to shovel tons of leaves. If you go in the yard next door, it's nothing but leaves. You just, you know. So I just think it's a fire hazard. It should be looked. All the gutters are always full. You can't have any gutters that have anything, any space in them. So, you know, the wall is cracking back there right now from the tree, so it's going to probably extend over the top. I mean, at some point, it's going to outgrow the area that it's in, because you got 2 trees here right as one. It's just a huge, huge tree. What else was I going to say? I really think undergrounding the utilities is really stretching for this property. It doesn't, you know, it's just, I mean, that's a big expense. I don't know how that's going to factor into the cost equation, but every property that's renovated has an underground utilities. I mean, and the one on Park on Powell we put in, there were no lights in the street, no street lights. It's dark over there. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing no comments. Commissioner comments, direction to the applicants.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, I think overall, I do want to say that the townhome configuration is a really nice configuration. It does provide an efficiency in terms of the density. The efficiency of the shared driveway is nice. So there are a lot of elements that are really great about this project. You know, I still look at that frontage and it bugs me. And I think the question is more, I mean, I don't have a great solution for you. And so this is this is sort of that question of just thinking about the mechanics of the trash cans and the balcony and the driveway and the garage, and that you know, these are all sort of hard elements to orchestrate in a way, because the trash cans and the garage are more service oriented elements, but your front door and your balcony are more street frontage elements. And so you're trying to balance these two things. And so the only question I would have is really about the trash cans and whether they can be screened enough or whether they can be desirable enough underneath the balcony so as to not impact the things that are working quite well in terms of the entry and the balcony. So I still have a little concern there about that. I see that you're trying to address it. I'm not sure that it's fully addressed. So I think that was my just sort of some comments on that. The unit sizes are large, you know, and I'm just sort of even looking at the previous project. They're spacious and they are family friendly. I think they're going to be expensive and lovely, but so, and I think that's a good thing. But I think for the commission, it's sort of something to think about in terms of housing balance. But I don't think your project can necessarily answer that question. I think I'm I think a comment about bike parking is the same as the previous project, of that question of secured bike parking. My bike was stolen from Park on Powell, so not too far away. And that was like in a locked container area. So I see that you have the bike parking there. I see that, I think it's great in terms of having the outdoor space, in terms of having it in the back. That's all great. I know you're going to work on locations in the units. Is that what you said? Sorry.
You have to come up to the microphone if you're going to respond.
There is secure bike parking inside.
Okay. Yeah.
It's there in the, let's see. Yeah, you can see it at the entry there on the front units, and in the garage there's kind of a pocket that's carved out.
Okay, great. Yep.
So what I was, so they have shown the inside secure bike parking area. What they haven't provided yet are the dimensions for those areas.
Okay.
So they just need to show that it complies with our code requirements for dimensions. But other than that, it is all there. The bike parking in the rear does not meet our dimensional requirements. So that's just going to have to be revised, but there's still room for it. And that's designed to be temporary guest parking. And that's partly why it's screened as well.
Okay. That answered some questions too. Thanks. And then, yeah, I mean, I think all of the other elements are looking good, and you've addressed things like the underground utilities, like the streetscaping. So I did want to just say that the massing and the articulation and the materials are quite attractive, and so I appreciate the effort that's gone into that.
I'll keep it brief. I think it's great. I think by the time this third study came around, we really nipped and tucked everywhere we could. I'll just say it's everything about it, really, the color scheme, the makeup of it, the subtle incongruency of the two halves. I think it's very sophisticated. So great job.
Let's see, I think I missed one of these study sessions, but probably that's why it's so good right now. But the last edition of this, I remember, was the prior design effort by a different architect, and I think this is really infinitely better. I think the at the back units that where you've stepped back for the neighbors and for getting more air and light back there, I think that's really very nice. I think that the your manipulation of the volumes, really, you've just got tremendous visual activity going on every elevation. I think it's terrific. But I'm wondering, I don't know if you only have if you're only allowed to put so many colors per project on your each project that you do. But I feel like if you have another color in your repertoire, you might consider adding it to this instead of just, the one reason is that you have all this tremendous variation of volumes going on, but the constant blue color up front, it sort of buries that, the different volumes and their positions. Everything looks like it's flattened out, is what I'm trying to say. And I really like the wood. You know, you've done a lot of really nice projects using this kind of wood treatment, so I think that'll be, I think this front street will be very successful. You have the open space for units 1 and 4, I think it is, if I remember, like the front units there on Doyle, right on, facing onto the sidewalk into Doyle. And I don't know if you used to have a garden gate there or not, but you might consider that for those units, just as a way to keep you know, kids or dogs out of those yards, if people want to keep their lawn furniture there and have it there when they come back at the end of the day. You know, I asked you about the sloped parapets, roofs, and I'm not sure, you know, if this is an aesthetic choice on your part, or if you feel that you could, if you could technically put sloped roofs on there, but to me it would seem like a good thing to do for those volumes. And that would be my little opinion. And you know, you have the living spaces for the front units with decks on the second level, and they're recessed and they have the volumes hanging out over them, so they get nice sunshade from the western sun. But the windows above, they could also profit from some kind of sun shading potentially, if that's in your budget. So those are my comments. I think you've done a really good job.
I find myself really drawn to this, the aesthetics of this project. I think that you also, as most of my colleagues said, did a great job with this. I do have some concerns with the roots of the trees. It seems like thinking long term. That would be something that I'm not an arborist, and we've had a study on this, I see, but just thinking more long term, that's a concern that I have in that side of the building. I do appreciate your emphasis on sustainability a lot. And so the idea that this is located on Bicycle Boulevard and you've made some accommodations for that, I appreciate. And I also would like to learn more about the EV charging stations in the parking spots. I think that would be something that people are really drawn to there. And then, of course, thinking long-term, that would come in handy for the direction that things are going with vehicles, too. So, thank you.
Alrighty, I'm pretty much on par with my fellow commissioners. I do have to politely disagree with Commissioner Banta. Is the one thing I have been striving for on this commission is to get rid of the tricolored, quad-colored units that we were plagued with for so many years. I really like the balance of colors here. The articulation, I think, is really good. A lot of times, I think, as we discussed, it's used in place of good architecture, but here you guys have used it appropriately and with intent, and I think it looks really good. I like the colors. I don't usually like blue houses, but seeing a lot more buildings today done in really dark, rich colors, and I think the blue here with the white alcoves for the doors, or the white ceilings in the balcony patio areas to reflect that, I think that was really, really well done. The light wood contrast, I think, is just very, very, very well done. So I'm very happy with what you've shown here. I was going to have some pictures brought up, but I think we've all seen them, etc. But I'm looking at kind of the really rendering of the children playing in the motor court. And to me, this, with the balconies that are open with the railings looking out, it's slide A5.4. That one. I just really think this almost evokes a neighborhood plaza or something, that, and with this balcony that is open railed and overlooking that area, it really kind of ties the community together. And I think because there's only 6 units, you're not going to get a lot of cars in and out. So I think this is a true viable play space for kids that is not normally seen in a lot of, like the first project we saw this evening, that parking lot is a parking lot. It's, I can't see kids playing in that. This I could see kids playing in, I could see adults bringing out a chair, hanging out here while their kids are there. So I think that's just really a good job. And there's so much glass. I mean, I just really, really appreciate, as you're looking at the people standing in the second story window, you can really get a sense of how big those windows are. And as a person living in a place with big windows, it's such an asset that if you don't have it, you don't know really what it's like. And I see so many of these complexes like this built with little tiny windows, and it's really kind of sad. And I think it opens up, it makes us feel like a community rather than a cloistered group of houses. And so I think you guys have done really well on that. And Nora, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide on 5A5.5. It shows the front of it. And this is where I think you guys have really done a good job. I can understand about putting the gate on the entry for privacy. I don't know that that's totally necessary. What we're often trying to do is connect the houses to the neighborhoods. But for me, it could go either way. But the private balconies above, they still connect to the street, but yet they allow some privacy for the inside of the house. But so you've kind of done a good job of doing both, creating privacy and connecting to the community. And what in your drawings or in your floor plans is just amazing to me when I think back of the first and second iteration. It was 5.5. It may not be in that slideshow, which is fine.
For 5, you were talking about the front of the building, though?
Oh, yeah, our plans show it as 5.5, so
And this is-
it's not that important, because I'm
So
almost
I just
done.
want to make sure I was getting to the front of the building when we were talking about the
Yeah.
front of the building.
Switched them, it's at the very beginning of the slideshow.
Aha. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes a difference.
Positive note, so we put it all the way at the beginning.
That makes
There
it.
you go. There it is, yeah. So, and then I'm just amazed at the kitchens before were so tiny, and it was like really there was like no counter space. It was like an island floating out in nowhere. And what you guys have done, and especially to have a window over the sink, which is so rare anymore these days, and yet it's so desired. And so when I saw that, especially on units 1 and 4, I was like, wow, this is, you guys have done a really great job on taking something that really wasn't working so well in the first iterations and have really, shown us that what a good, competent team could do. So kudos, very good.
Well, that explains where the color scheme came from.
Yeah, it was that neat.
Right. You probably had a lot more interesting colors before you chimed in, didn't you?
Yeah, I also think everyone agrees that it's better than what had gone before. I think that part of the comments about the lack of interest in the front could be addressed in part by Commissioner Bantas talking about a small garden gate at the entry that increases the transition between the street and the private space in front of the house, but also some really robust planting. I know that part of the area is going to be paved with pervious pavers so that people can sit there, but having some planting that comes up and gives some kind of shape and form in front of those long windowless places. I'm glad you added the windows to the garages, because I think that helps too. It doesn't hurt to have light in your garage. People do things with their garage. We have the parking spaces. I think that we'll be getting at least 1, if not 2, additional street parking spaces. So I know that there had been earlier discussions about what happens with guest parking and all that, but I think that we're coming out ahead on that. What neighbor Bukowski brought up about the litter on the redwood tree, I have a redwood tree that's similar size, and it does drop a whole lot of stuff. So if you have completely flat roofs, I don't know how people are going to address the accumulation up there, and maybe that's something that needs to have a little bit more thought. Other than that, I think that it looks like it's going in the right direction. Yeah.
One other comment I did want to make that I forgot. Since the rear units don't have garages, and I don't know what your secure parking situation is going to be inside the house, I was thinking something you could do in those outdoor spaces in the back is provide a bike locker in those 2 spaces if you have difficulty finding it within the unit. but that could be something you could do.
Okay. So did we answer the questions that had been put out in front of us? Feedback regarding the design? Do we have the findings for conditional use? Address the concerns? Seems like everyone's feeling that this project's going in the right direction. So, okay. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you come back. Good.
Soon, I hope.
Won't be another, but you won't see the fourth architect.
We hope not. All right. This is the last item on the agenda is commissioner comments. Any commissioner comments?
Welcome, Commissioner Guerrero.
Yeah.
You've all been really welcoming, and so I just wanted to just say that I know I have big shoes to fill, and I'm very excited about this opportunity, and looking forward to working with you all. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. I do have one comment, and it was brought up by the first study session, and I think it would be useful to at some point really relook a little bit at the parking regulations that create a minimum and then the possibility of slicing the minimum in half, because that 29 units with family-friendly and 15 parking spaces in an area that's congested already seems problematic to me. But
if I could just respond to that.
Sure.
The regulations are somewhat flexible in that they do allow an applicant to apply for a conditional use permit to exceed the maximum parking. And the findings are such that that they can justify that amount of parking is actually necessary, and that it won't detract from use of other modes and things like that. Those are the findings that the commission has to make. But if you can make a finding that additional parking is necessary and won't detract from use of other modes, you can allow more than the maximum
well, they were
parking.
at the minimum. They could have.
Right.
Have fit
Well, they
in
can
and-
certainly go up.
Yeah.
Without needing any special approval.
Right.
And then if they go above that, they would need that use permit.
Yes.
And on that, I feel that if when they come back, if
Wait, I'm going to stop you right here.
Okay.
So this is for commission comments right now, and we're kind of getting into talking about
A specific project.
the specific project.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep those
Thank you.
commissioners-
Keep us in line.
Commissioners in line.
Okay. Then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.